Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. This year, it's taking $51 billion to run this city. At least that's the size of the city's budget. But how did that budget get decided? In other words, how do we decide to spend this money? Helen Rosenthal is a veteran of the city's Office of Management and Budget, and she now devotes her considerable talents to Community Board 7, the community board on the west side of Manhattan that I'm most familiar with since I live in its district. So hello.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's talk about community boards. How many are there in the city?
There are 59 citywide. There are 12 in Manhattan. And the community board is made up of volunteers from all different areas. There are up to 50 members on each community board. All walks of life, business owners, teachers, real estate people, community volunteers like me. And we are asked to give advice to the city on a wide range of issues: land use, zoning, dog runs.
I remember the dog runs. That was always a major thing.
Major issue. It's, you know, and
what is it?
It matters.
It's on whatever the city has an impact in that district, or.
That's
but there
right.
are certain statutes, or there are certain formal steps that with certain items that have to be cleared.
That's exactly right, and we're often the first step, and people are looking for our approval to take that approval when they go to city planning or to another city agency to say, look, the community board passed, signed off on this issue. It might be sidewalk cafes, whether or not we can have a cafe on the sidewalk. Newsstands, right.
Right.
Exactly.
How do you get appointed? By the borough president and the city council member.
Right. You really get appointed by the borough president upon recommendation by a city council member.
And I think this is an opportunity for us to disclose that originally I appointed you
Absolutely.
when I was the city council.
And thank you, because I've really enjoyed my time there, and I think we've gotten a lot done.
Well, I'm very pleased because I think you're doing very well.
Thank you.
But do the appointments really reflect the community, do you think?
Oh, I do think so. We do have a wide range, and I appreciate the other perspectives.
Yeah.
So, we could be talking about a historic preservation issue, something that really is not my forte. And I look to the architects and the community planning people on the board for what they see. What they see visually or in terms of the context of the neighborhood. I really count on their input.
And the community then, when there is an issue that's of interest to the blocks, specific blocks within the district, they really come to the community board?
Yes, the community board meets, that's a great point. The community board as a whole meets once a month. Just a plug for Community Board 7, we meet on the first Tuesday of every month, and we look for community participation. We love for people to come, and we dedicate the first part of every meeting to anyone who wants to speak can come up and talk about whatever's on their mind, whether it be a crack in the sidewalk that's a problem, and we can then refer that to our district manager, who's excellent and can really dog that specific issue, or something broader.
When I was on the council, and I had 3 community boards at one point in the district, what I noticed was each community board had its own personality. It was very interesting. I wonder, have you been to any other community board meetings?
I've not. I've just become immersed in, I guess, the personality of our community board.
You should try it, because it's really interesting. Not every community board has the same routine.
Right.
They don't even sit the same way often. And there's just a whole different flavor. I haven't been to well, I did once years ago when I worked at the Port Authority. I went out to Queens. Boy, they were tough because the Port Authority was doing something they didn't want them to do. So it was one of those things. So tell me, now you're funded from the mayor's budget, right? Is
the
it
community
funded?
board itself. Yes, there's a funding from the mayors from the citywide budget for each of the community boards. I think they actually might get different amounts of money, but it's for a small staff, a district manager and whatever staff they can have.
That's what every community board
Every
has
community board, and they help with the day-to-day issues of service, of city service, whether it's litter basket removal, to police, fire, sanitation, those types of things, and they can be instrumental. So we, however, are volunteers.
Right, but so they really have a mandated city role.
They do, and our role is not only to address those immediate issues, but also to give the first sign-off on land use issues, and also in the budget to come up with a list of what our district needs are, and to prioritize needs. And right now, the place we are, and I'm sure we'll get to this in the budget cycle, is that we have an opportunity now as a community board to make our recommendations to the city.
The budget, the preparation for the budget for 2006, 2007, I mean, we're always a year ahead, right?
Exactly.
And that's the budget that will be adopted by the City Council by June 30th, I think, or July 1st.
And at November 1st, I think it's right around this time, the mayor puts out a preliminary budget which addresses updates for the current year. And then in January, he'll put out a preliminary budget for the next year. As you say now, it'll be the FY06.
But your community board...
I think actually FY07 cycle.
I
something
think it's
very far.
6-7, isn't it? Or 7-8, maybe? No, it
7.
can't be.
It's
6-7, yeah.
It'll be in 06 for 07.
Right. You have now met... What have you done in your steps? You're going to make recommendations about the things that need to be done in the district that reflect on the budget that you would like to have in the budget.
That's exactly right. We spend the spring and the summer putting out something called a district needs statement, where we try to reach out to community groups, senior centers, daycare centers, after-school programs, and also reach out to, you know, the fire stations, the police precinct places, police precinct offices, and hear from them about what's going on a day-to-day basis in our neighborhoods. And Community Board 7, as you know, runs from Lincoln Center area to the Upper West Side, all the way to Manhattan Valley. So it's a very diverse...
Up to what, 110th Street?
That's right, Cathedral Parkway. So it's a very diverse group of individuals. We try to meet with all of them, but we also try to meet with city agencies to hear about where they may be taking budget cuts and think about how that could affect our community.
And it's an interesting give and take, because the city agencies come to the community boards anxious to get their needs into the community needs, because, as you said, they're aware that they may be getting cuts, right?
And I always
it's
think...
all a very political process.
Very political, and I always think it's so ironic. There are these things in September when they're called budget consultation meetings, and the community boards are invited in together as the Manhattan community boards all come together, and we meet with the city agencies. Often, you know, it's the deputy commissioners. It's really terrific. And
Where do you do this, in the borough president's office?
Well, this is what's so interesting. It's always at the Office of Management and Budget.
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
I always think it's such a hoot, because they were probably there a week before, where OMB was saying to them, you have to cut your budgets, and we have to figure out a way to cut your budgets.
So then, now they come to you to put it back in. It's interesting.
But they're very careful. I mean, they're very political. They don't, you know.
This is a new process, because when I was in the council, I remember Community Board 7 having a meeting in the district with the sanitation department. I mean, they came to the district.
It's both. There's actually, there are meetings there at Martin Luther King High School. You probably remember it, right, and LaGuardia High School, where they come in. And I think different agencies do it different ways. So we do get a chance for them to come to us, which is really nice, too.
Right. So now you're discussing... Now you have a report.
Yes, and actually we just completed our report, and the way the community board is organized is there's a full board, but there are also committees that cover each of the different aspects that are important to the community. There's youth and community development, there's health and human services, there's uniform services, transportation, parks, and those committees each meet monthly. And over the last few months, they've been talking about what their budget priorities are. And then we, as our committee, which is Budget and Strategy, we got together, looked at all of those different priorities, and thought about what we've heard over the course of the whole year, and thought about where we would recommend to the full board which priorities on the expense side and on the capital side, which would be first, second, third, fourth, all the way down. We get up to 25 expense priorities and 40 capital priorities.
And what's the difference between, for some of our viewers, the difference between a capital project and an expense?
Right. An expense project would be something having to do with the ongoing budget, personnel services, and supplies. Something that the agency might do there. A capital budget would be for large capital projects. When I was working in city government, always in the capital budget, I covered the health agencies, Kings County Hospital, doing a renovation there, Queens County Hospital, renovating there.
Basically.
Buildings, right?
Yeah. So whether it's streets.
Exactly. And so for our community, given what our needs are, and as I say, it's a wide range of people, but we're looking for more housing. you know, to happen in our community. That would be great. I don't know how realistic it is.
It's so interesting because, all right, so you're the west side of Manhattan, where the prices have risen to astronomical levels, where we really do need to protect whatever moderate middle income housing we have. How do you express that as a budget priority? You know, well, we list housing first. You just say housing.
Well, we say affordable housing.
Affordable housing.
But you're so right. It's a complicated district. It's a district where there's been so much development that's happened. And as you say, the price of apartments are skyrocketing. Also, in our district, in Community Board 7, is the largest compilation of Mitchell-Lima housing units in the city. So while what happens and what's happened to us over the years that I've been on the community board is that the wealth has masked pockets of poverty that are definitely there.
At least three major public housing projects.
Yes, that's exactly right. And even with that, we've lost our anti-poverty money.
I see. So that's
because
a big problem.
Other areas are looking like they need more.
You don't attach actual money.
Where we can, we do.
You do.
For example, one of our needs is for after-school programs. We'd like $1 million back from the city, so we'll attach a real dollar amount there. On the capital side for housing, affordable housing, really hard to attach dollar amount there.
All right. Then you send this report to OMB.
It goes to OMB, and the way it works in the cycle is that OMB then looks at it, probably sends it to the city agencies, has a list of responses they can give back to us. And that'll happen like in February or March. And so they'll come back, and I know this because I used to work on the other side, and there was somebody on my staff who would write these responses. But they would say things like, you know, it's already in the budget, go talk to the agency about it. You know, if we're asking for a study on you know, rat control or something like that. It's already in the budget. Or they'll say, go talk to your elected official about it. There's not money in the mayor's budget for this now.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Do you also give your report to the elected official and to the borough president?
We try to.
To your local council member.
We try to. And we have an excellent...
Because those are, we should explain also, those are two different additional pots of money.
What do you mean?
In the final budget.
Yes.
The city council members have discretionary money, and also they have the opportunity to put something into the budget that then is negotiated with the mayor and may cross over the line and go into the mayor's budget.
Exactly.
It's very complicated.
It's very complicated.
And the borough president has a pot of money that the borough president can decide where to go, where to spend it.
That's exactly right. And just to explain that a little bit more, I mean, from a community board's perspective, what we would ultimately want is for the mayor to put it in the budget, because then it's in for 4 years, and that's called the base budget.
Right.
And city council members can work with the mayor's staff to get items in as well.
We call that baselining.
Exactly.
It's baselined.
Right.
Which means you don't have to worry every year about lobbying.
So something like an after-school...
On the other hand, it may be cut. If there's an across the board.
But when a city council member adds money from, they all get a sum of money that they can add for 1 year.
Yeah.
So it's a 1 year thing. And then you're worried about every year it coming back, which is very frustrating. On the other hand, it can be so helpful because you get a program, I don't know how much detail you want to go into, but you can get a program like for the NORC, for the naturally occurring retirement communities, which are new things going up, and we're looking to expand them on the Upper West Side. If we can get our elected officials to support it for 1 year, maybe the mayor can learn about it, see how effective it is, so great, and we can urge him to put it in his baseline budget.
Right. Now, we did that actually when I was in the council. Is it not still there? It never got baseline.
NORC's excellent, and thank you on behalf of the community. Absolutely, there are 2 NORCs that are in our baseline now, which are excellent, and we worry about exactly. We want to add a new one, and we have a new mechanism for how to implement them that are more horizontal rather than vertical. So we reach out into the community more.
Now, so you've shared those reports, and then you embark upon a year-long dialogue, I guess, with different people. But do the community boards share with each other?
I wish we did. We don't, to my knowledge. Perhaps it happens, I'm sure it happens at a district manager level. But as a community board member, no. And there are, you know, if you look at the panoply of issues, many are specific to our community. But something like after-school program, daycare slots,
affordable housing
have to be citywide. And when the mayor made the cut to after-school programs, I understand, you know, the mayor's not, you know, the money's not trickling down from the federal government, and that just has to happen. He did his best job at restructuring and you know, giving as much money to programs as possible. But I would like to see, as a community board member, our district was cut 30%. I would like to see some other district that was targeted for the money. I would like to know that they actually got the money and there are good programs there and they're running well. And, you know, when we advocate for more money, I don't want to be out of step with what those communities need as well. So it would be a good thing if we could get together.
Even more than that, it also would be good when you both see this, when you all see the same needs. I mean, it has the potential of giving the power really to the people. Because if, in fact, we go along with the theory that the community boards represent their communities, and that's a question, you know, as to really how much they do represent, not necessarily Community Board 7, but others. And I've always wondered, should they get elected?
Interesting.
You know, the same way we elect, you know, like on 2 blocks, or like election districts, which is about a 2-block area, right? The problem is we've had such bad times with school board elections with so few people coming. But anyway, if they got elected, they'd really be tied into the accountability of something that elected officials are. But here you've got 50 people. They're representing your community. They draw their needs. They send it in. They represent the budget. Now suppose, and I'm sure that affordable housing arises, is on the top of how many 59?
59. I would hope so.
Yeah. So if everybody was able to get together and then really also lobby the city council and lobby the mayor, it would make a significant difference.
Do you find that it happened, I don't mean to turn this around, but do you find that happened with city council members? I mean, were you able to get behind certain issues?
Oh, yeah, sometimes, yes. Oh, of course, yes, you can. There's always a group that wants, you know, different things like after-school programs or that kind of stuff. And then you've got the cross-reference with committees. Yes. You know, so the youth committee wants this and the health committee wants that. And you do form coalitions and you do have to, it's always strategy. I mean, at every level you're developing a strategy.
That's
at every level you have to do a strategy. But the city council, when I was there, we didn't have the same kind of budget operation in the community board.
Right.
And it didn't work this way. So I have great hope, but I hope you're not unique. And that this is happening. You
know, I don't know. I mean, we're getting an increasingly, over the time that I've been there, we've gotten an increasingly terrific response from the community and from city agencies. I think they're learning that we're really trying to help specific organizations for the good of the entire community, for working families, for, you know, particularly on after-school programs.
Is there a central place that when a member is appointed to a community board, do they go and do they learn anything? I mean, is anything told them? Does anybody teach the budget process?
There is a training session that the borough president's office gives because they make the appointment. You know, my background is in the budget area, so I happen to know that area.
That's a very valuable thing, and we should talk to the new borough president of Manhattan and have him have you go to all the, how many, 10 in the city?
There are 12 in Manhattan. I mean, the thing that I can bring to our community board is, since I help to oversee all the healthcare budgets under actually Dinkins, Koch, and a year of Giuliani, I have a perspective of what they're looking for at the city level and what types of things might catch their eye. And where, you know, we're just never going to win it, unfortunately, so maybe put it down a little bit lower on our priorities. But I would love to do that. I think it's important stuff, and I think to the degree that we can speak with a unified voice, only the better for our communities.
The other thing is also to find some common ground between the other boroughs.
Yes.
You know, people look at Manhattan, and they think we're all, now I'm talking from city council experience, they think we're all crazy to be living in Manhattan. You know, the density, the high rise and everything. And so they just don't care. And when we complain about something, it's, you know, I mean, it's essentially, the city council is essentially a suburban body, or it has been until development has really taken off. I mean, I think
even in the
different ways of thinking.
Right.
So it would be so much more empowering to everybody if we were able to share all these things. I mean, are there any citywide conventions or meetings of the community boards?
Not that I'm aware of. I think that would be a great idea.
Maybe Community Board 7 could sponsor one.
All right, we'll get out there.
Right. How does one know when there's a meeting for the community board?
Well, for our community board, just to give a pitch, you can log on to www.cb7.org, and our calendar and our agendas are always listed on there. Everyone's welcome, and as I say, the full board meets the first Tuesday of every month.
I would imagine that every borough president has a website, and that you go on to that website, and there must be a link to community boards. I think for our viewers who don't live in Manhattan, and
right,
that they could then go through the borough president, look for the link
yes,
to community boards,
yes,
or look in the city government.
Yes, you can always go on to nyc.gov
yeah,
and try to find your community board. You know, and it's incumbent upon all of the community boards to update their websites regularly. My friends who live in Brooklyn will ask me about what I'm doing and how they can get involved with theirs, or even in other parts of Manhattan, and they do get frustrated not being able to go on. Ours is particularly good.
It's a really, what changes would you make if you had to make a change? Can you think of a change to make?
In terms of the process and the budget process? And how
it affects the actual community and
how effective it is? You know,
it's
so interesting when you know, I think in life, in my experiences anyway, I don't know, you know, other people see this, but it all sort of, it circles round. You know, when I worked in city government, I don't think I fully appreciated the work that the community boards were doing, and I didn't have such a clear understanding of how incredibly valuable they could be. I mean, we did our work in going out and trying to, you know, bring an issue alive by going to the site. But to hear from the community board that this is an issue that is uniform in their community, it can be so powerful. So if I were doing it again, I would like to have more access as a community board member to the people who are making these decisions, and to be given a real forum to be able to explain why we need more after-school programs, and why the money, well, I understand why it was cut, and I know I keep going back to it. It happens to be a hot issue for us right now, but the money that was funded in our area went to established after-school programs. I can understand that. The fringe groups, however, are just as important, and they're the ones serving in the areas where there are pockets of poverty. They're not as well, these groups are not as well established, they're not as flashy, and they serve the diverse community that we want to keep in our neighborhoods.
How does the...
I wish I could communicate that.
Yes, well, we'll have to send a tape. Where do we send it? To OMB or to the mayor?
There you go.
How has the 311 system affected community boards? Do you know?
Oh, that's a great question, because it could be so incredibly helpful, because it's a great accumulation of facts. However, we haven't been able to get the information from the central 311 office to know exactly what the breakdown is for needs in our community. We would love to have a report that says, you know, this month, you know, the city got, you know, 100 calls about pothole complaints, 100 calls about, you know, cracks in the sidewalks, you know, 100 calls about sidewalk cafes. That could be so valuable to us in making decisions. It's not being given to us.
So I think we should call our city council member and talk to her about some legislation that mandates the reporting to community boards on at least a quarterly basis.
Yes.
The breakdown of the 311 calls.
You know what, when you say our city council member, I hope you are addressing that citywide, because my city council member happens to be on the cutting edge of this and is doing a great job trying to get that information out, which is terrific.
It should be legislation for everybody.
Right. That's exactly right. And more legislation that directly gives community boards, you know,
that information,
the specific information and power to do something with it.
Right.
Which would be so great.
Does the community board develop leadership qualities in people?
We're trying to do. That's actually something that has been on our agenda over the last few years, and we've increasingly had meetings to get to know each other better and get to know what each other's interests are, so we can have the people who have real strengths in certain areas grow within the community board, take over chairmanships of certain committees, you know, to make sure that we have the teachers running the youth committee. for example.
Well, I'm not so sure that's always so great, is it? I don't know. I shouldn't say that.
You know, I mean, it depends. Of course, it's so personality driven, which makes it all very interesting.
Yeah, it is.
But you want somebody
all
there.
Leadership.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But you want somebody who really knows, who's there every day and can.
You grew up in Michigan.
Yes.
And you've lived on the west side of Manhattan for how long now?
Nearly 20 years.
Is it like growing up in? Is it like in a funny way? Is it like where you grew up in Michigan?
Wow, that's such an interesting question. I grew up in a suburb. So after school, I was able to, you know, go ride my bike outside with my friends and my
And that was
girls.
28 years ago or something, right?
Oh, yeah, I think it was just about 10 years ago.
Aside from the different way we live,
Yeah.
the ability to affect what happens on your block, do you think it's a pretty responsive system, isn't it?
It is. It is. You know, it's hard to make a comparison.
Yeah.
It's really hard. No, that's all right. It's hard to make a comparison. I think that, you know, people who decide to stay in, what I found is the people who decide to stay in New York and not leave as they have children, really want to have an impact on their community, and they want to find ways to get involved. And the community board's a great place to do that.
That's a wonderful way to end this program. So thank you very much, Helen Rosenthal, who chairs the Budget and Strategy Committee of Community Board 7. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.